Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum salam. Just want to make sure that the audio is good. Can somebody confirm on both YouTube and on Facebook that the audio is working fine? Alaikum salam, Fayaz. Alaikum salam, Shanu and Sumair and Sister Siddiqa and Sister Layla and Sharif and Yunus and Sister Nudrat. Alaikum salam. Alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah. So audio is good on both. Ridwan says audio is goof, but everyone else says it's good. So alhamdulillah. Alaikum salam, Ridwan. As we're getting ready to start, please also share the feed. You can share it on Facebook as a watch party, or just on various pages and groups that you're part of. And also you can use the YouTube link to share on different chats, family chats, WhatsApp, whatever else. So please take a moment and do that, and I will begin in just a moment. I will also just take a moment and share the feed as well. And once you share the feed, please make sure to share salams with each other as well. Again, we're trying to recreate that feeling of being together. We miss that, but we don't miss the opportunities to greet each other. Alhamdulillah, we have ways to do that still. So let's make sure we share our salams with each other as well. Alaikum salam, Sister Navida. Alaikum salam, Nasir, Zainab. Alaikum salam, Imam Aziz. I wish that you were in this chair instead of me at the moment. Alhamdulillah, I'll fulfill my duty. Alaikum salam, Brother Nofa. Brother Muhassin. Sister Sauda. Sister Su'ala, excuse me. I think there are so many I've missed, so please forgive me. Once again, just a reminder, let's go ahead and share the feed. And as you're doing that, inshallah, we'll begin our Friday spiritual talk. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له هو الأول والآخر هو الملك القدوس السلام هو الرحمن الرحيم وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله الله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على الحبيب المصطفى وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وارض عنا معهم بفضلك وكرمك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم آمين. I begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I begin in the name of our Lord, our Creator, our Sustainer and Maintainer. I begin in God's name in recognition of all of the blessings that I am witness to and all of the blessings that I am negligent of. I begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by singing His praises and acknowledging His presence in my life and in all of our lives. I begin with the remembrance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge of every affair, and He is responsible for every circumstance, and He is the one who is capable of all things, and in all of His capacity He chose for you and I, my dear brothers and sisters, to exist, to live, to thrive, to be members of this community, to be living in this time, to be participants in these moments of history. And I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. And I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah. And I bear witness that He has sent to us His final prophet and messenger as a bearer of glad tidings, as a role model. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send His peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and upon his family members, his companions, his loved ones, and upon all of the men and women that walk in his footsteps, all of those people who champion his path and who teach his teachings and who live by those lessons. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make each and every one of us among them in this life and in the next. My dear brothers and sisters, I greet you with the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Once again, we were together in this, in this digital form, unable to be together for the khutbah and for Jum'ah, but certainly able to gather on this special day, Friday, the day that is selected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to remind ourselves with spiritual reminders and to encourage each other to do good and to work against that which is evil. And I pray that today's reminder will serve in that capacity as well. And I wanted to start today by sharing some observations that I actually think you have made as well if you're in any way involved in the community. These are things that when I say them, I think you'll recognize them as well. These are observations and questions that I would like to get us thinking. Now, when it comes to youth work, which is something that, a lot of masajid and a lot of communities, talk a lot about and commit themselves verbally to doing, but it varies from one place to another how much of that commitment comes to fruition. But even in the cases where the communities are really, really dedicated to youth work and to focusing on the younger generation, when they're organizing events and activities and so much resources, which of those activities consistently has larger turnout from the youth? Ask yourself that question. Which of them has consistently, not just once or twice, but consistently, there's always a large turnout? Also, ask yourself this question: which of those activities and events generate the most energy and the most excitement when it comes to the youth? Which of those, events that are organized are the ones where you find youth who maybe you've never seen at the masjid before? Youth who, maybe they came, but you never noticed them. They never really stood out. They never really got involved in any way. And all of a sudden they're there, they're present, they're interested, right? And, further questioning, which of those events and activities are the ones where young Muslims always find themselves so excited to bring friends, and not just Muslim friends, but even non-Muslim friends? You see this happen, right? There's a certain kind of event that answers all of these questions. Finally, another observation: which of those events organized for youth are those events where young people are most ready to speak up, most ready to actually take action and get involved and even take lead? What events answer all of these questions? Is it the spiritual lectures, when you bring some, big name from somewhere in the US? No, it's not. Is it the fiqh class, the class about, explaining some specific intricate detail or academic approach to Islam? The answer is no, absolutely not. Is it the social events, the events where you're just gonna have fun? Sometimes those events are exciting and energizing, but not on a consistent basis, right? And it really depends on who's going to be there and who's organizing, right? So even there, the answer is no. The answer to all of these questions, what type of activities generate this kind of turnout, excitement, new youth, bringing non-Muslim friends, speaking up, taking action, taking lead? The answer to this is the activities and the events that highlight, focus, and centralize the causes of justice. Events related to social justice, events related to economic justice, events where youth feel like they are going to be able to participate and contribute to the restoration of justice in some way. That's what we've noticed consistently over years. Now, I have to be honest, and I know, I'm saying this as from experience as well. I know that this actually worries some parents. Perhaps this worries many parents. And let me explain what I mean by this worries them. I'll share that with you through a story, actually, very recently, just a few days ago, maybe a week ago or so. It was actually a few weeks ago that the youth at Tarbiyah Institute organized and decided to attend one of the protests, happening in regards to, the current events, the atrocious, tragic murder of George Floyd, and the underlying issues that this brought to light. And so many young people wanted to participate, and so we organized, the safest possible way, this protest. And we were expecting certain numbers, and that expectation was completely shattered. We had a huge number of youth. Again, folks we've never even seen before, folks who have come for the first time, bringing non-Muslim friends, excitement, energy, wanting to lead. So this is the dynamic we saw once again, right? And after the protest, just a few days later, I got a call from a mom. This is a mother of one of the young men who attended with us. And she's calling essentially to complain. And her complaint, I'm trying to summarize here, is basically, she says that they have a masjid that's just down the street. And no matter what kind of activity they're organizing at the masjid, he never seems to want to go. He just, for some reason, is always resistant, right? She says he's not a bad kid, he does what we ask him to do and stuff, but for some reason he just resists participating in those activities. And then we went and organized this event. And by the way, they don't even live in Sacramento. And she says that when he heard about this event that we organized, he forced his mom to drive him almost an hour to come to Sacramento in order to participate in this, cause and movement for justice. And she was complaining. She was upset that this is the kind of attitude he has, towards his faith and her understanding. So I started to ask her some questions, and I think we should ask ourselves, especially parents, but just as a community at large. I asked her, sister, can you tell me what it is about Islam that you teach him at home? What have you taught him? And so she, talked about prayer. She talked about, worship and niyyah, and she talked about fasting, and she talked about reading and understanding the Qur'an. And by the way, the answers she gave, were actually very, I thought, beautiful answers. She was not just, talking about simple understandings of the faith. She was talking about really teaching her son, the intricacies and the beauties of this deen. But then I wanted to divert the conversation because I didn't hear her talk about certain things that I was curious about. So I asked her, sister, what do you teach your child, or you and your husband, about those in need? What do you teach them about, seeing somebody in need? And she had an elaborate and lengthy, thorough answer about, teaching them to always help and always give from what they have. And she said that her husband has this habit whenever they see somebody on the side of the road, doesn't matter young, old, who, they always pull down the window, and he grabs whatever change is in the cup holder to give, right? This is just a habit that they have as a family, right? So then I asked her, okay, this is amazing, sister. What do you teach the children? What do you teach him about fairness and justice? And again, she had a thorough and elaborate answer talking about, by the way, stories like from the companions and that she shares with her kids, and talking about establishing fairness, at every level in the home, and about being fair when you, go to school, and all of these, elaborate discussions on justice. making justice very real for this young man. And then I asked, the third question was, okay, this is amazing. What about oppression? What do you teach him about oppression? And again, she cited stories, she cited examples, she cited modern examples, mentioning Palestine and Syria and even Kashmir. I mean, the answer she provided, again, it gave me, hope, and it felt like an amazing answer. I felt like this was an amazing mother. So at that point, I told her, sister, I think you called me to complain, right? That your son is not interested in the deen, and you're worried that he's not interested in the faith. But I actually think the opposite is true. I think everything you've told me thus far, and I think the amount of energy that he showed in wanting to participate in a cause for social justice has a lot to do with the deen itself and what you have taught your child about this deen. Your son is energized because that's exactly what you've been teaching him. Those are the lessons, the Islamic morals that he has actually internalized. I think you should be grateful. When our youth are so energized about causes of justice, it's an opportunity for us to recognize that the morality of Islam has entered their hearts. It means that at least some of the parenting that we're doing is working. Alhamdulillah. Now, I need to talk a moment to the youth, because I know there's young folks who are also in attendance. Young folks, let me talk to you, and I'm talking to you as somebody who's come from your ranks, I promise. I've been there. The desires to make the changes that you want to make and see the world made better, and your country and your state and your city made better, those desires that are coming out of your heart, they didn't come out of nowhere. They didn't just appear because you saw something on TV or because you watched something in a movie or a book, because somebody posted something on social media. That's not where it comes from. Those desires, that energy, you feel it. It's deep. It's deep in your heart, and that's because it's divinely inspired, and that's because you have inherited that desire and morality for social justice. You've inherited from your parents. Those teachings about justice and fairness, your parents have been working on those things since before you can remember, since before you could walk, since before you could articulate. Remember that they are the reason you're inheriting these things. And even when you come into disagreements with them because perhaps they don't understand the causes that you're interested in, remember where you inherited that morality. And remember that one day you will need to share that morality. You will need to share that inspiration with another generation. You will need to learn it so that you can teach it. If you don't learn your deen, how will you pass it on? And if you don't pass it on, the cause for justice and the restoration of justice will lose one of its greatest champions. It will lose the Muslim community as time goes on. We could not bear for that to be on us, right? It becomes our responsibility to understand where this morality comes from. Now, again, addressing everybody, Islam and the morality of Islam, it always, when it internalizes in our hearts, it always compels us to a kind of moral awakening. We live in an imperfect world. And when we see that imperfect world through the lens of the morality that Islam has internalized for us, that we have internalized from Islam, we are compelled to fight for justice. We are compelled to fight for righteousness by the morality of the Qur'an. I mean, really think about this. The stories of the prophets, the stories of the companions, of the nations of before, all of them are regularly teaching us these same moral foundations. And not only do we find it in the history that comes to us through the Qur'an, but we find it in the history that comes thereafter through the Sunnah. Our history and tradition from the Prophet ﷺ onwards bears this moral awakening out. We see again and again in Muslim situations, there are moral awakenings taking place. And I want to share some of those with you to kind of help you understand, what those moral awakenings look like and where they come from. And just share with you some stories, really. Some of them like, for example, the story of Ali ibn Abi Talib and his missing shield. You guys have heard this story, right? Many of us have heard the story in bedtime stories, for example. But these are actual events, right? An authentic narration. So Ali ibn Abi Talib, one of those days he had actually lost his shield. This is the time when he is Amir al-Mu'mineen. He's the head of the Muslim ummah, right? He's the Khalifa. And so one of those days he had lost his shield, the shield that he really valued and was special to him. And it was a special shield by the way it looked, and also he would be able to recognize that shield, by just looking at it and the markings and the dents and all this stuff, right? And so sometime later, he's in the marketplace and he sees a non-Muslim man who is, selling things, and on the table to be sold is his shield. And he goes up and he examines it and he looks at it and he recognizes all of the marks. He knows with certainty, this is his shield. This is my shield, he's thinking to himself. And so he articulates that to the merchant. Again, a non-Muslim man. He says, this is my shield. And he doesn't accuse him, you stole my shield. He just says that, it was lost from me and this is it. It was stolen from me. Not saying you did it, but this is mine. And so the man, replies, absolutely not. This is for sale. You want to buy it, fine, but you can't just, come and claim this, right? And so Ali ibn Abi Talib, he gets upset and he says, I know the shield, I recognize it, and if you don't return it to me, I'm the rightful owner, then I will bring a case against you in front of the judge. And so the man says, fine, bring your case, right? And Ali ibn Abi Talib brings his case to a judge, a famous judge from the Tabi'een, by the name of Shurayh ibn al-Harith, one of the greatest judges of the Tabi'een, right? By the way, appointed by Ali ibn Abi Talib as well. So he brings his case, and so they begin to, he starts presenting his case. And so Qadi Shurayh, he says, okay, yeah, Amir al-Mu'mineen, why don't you present some witnesses? Because you're the one making the claim. So he says, well, I can present witnesses. I can present my son. And so Qadi Shurayh says, I'm sorry, but I can't accept your son as a witness. That would be a conflict of interest, right? Your son would naturally support you. So he says, are you kidding me? This is, Al-Hasan. This is the prince of the people of Jannah, right? This is the Prophet's grandson. You couldn't take him at his word. So he says, I'm sorry, but in this case, it's a conflict of interest. I cannot. So in some of the narrations, Ali ibn Abi Talib also says, what about my servant? You would also recognize it as my shield. He says, once again, I'm sorry, but your servant, you could compel him to just say that in support of your case. Ali ibn Abi Talib is unable to present witnesses, and so Qadi Shurayh says, I have to decide in favor of this other individual. The shield, as of right now, must belong to him. So Ali ibn Abi Talib accepts the judgment and he begins to leave. And by the way, the way that this story ends is that the non-Muslim man is so impressed by this example and this exemplification of protection for the rights of minorities in the Islamic world. He's so impressed and so moved by this honesty in the system that would even allow for an unfair outcome, because he knows actually it is the shield of Ali ibn Abi Talib, that at that point he accepts Islam. This is the part of the story that we get so excited about, right? But one thing we don't remember is that the moment he accepted Islam is actually the very moment that he was most confident, that he was most assured of his protection as a non-Muslim in that society. It was that same moment. This story is a reminder to us of the way in which Islam, generates this kind of equal protection under the law. It protects the rights of minorities. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, mentions specifically ayat in the Qur'an that help give rise to this kind of morality. He says in the Qur'an, لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم إن الله يحب المقسطين. Allah does not forbid you from those who do not fight you because of your religion and do not expel you from your homes. Allah does not forbid you from being righteous towards them and act justly towards them. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who act justly. Right? You see that this is coming directly from divine inspiration. This is the moral awakening that has given rise in this particular case for the rights of minorities. And you see this across the board, by the way, brothers and sisters. The survival of minorities across the Muslim world, as large as the Islamic empires expanded, they did not, and in many cases they could not, even if they wanted, violate the rights of minorities without the religious class and the scholars and the people rising up against that, right? Speaking out against that, because they had this moral awakening that came from the early stages of Islam. Another example of one of those moral awakenings and one of those institutions that was built because of that comes to us from the story of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh. And his story, his biography is lengthy, but I just want to share some generic overviews of this. Abu Hurairah was a part of a group in Medina known as Ahlul Suffah. Ahlul Suffah were people who were in absolute poverty. They had, mostly because they accepted Islam, they had to leave their families, they had to leave their wealth behind. Many of them were coming from other parts of the peninsula and were not natives to Medina. Many of them had been abandoned by their tribes and even attacked by their tribes for their decision to follow the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, what did the Prophet ﷺ do with this group of people, suffering through abject poverty, with absolutely nothing to their name? I mean, you think about it, he could have asked one of the wealthy companions to just give them some wealth. He could have just, asked one of them who has, multiple property or area or space to, create a space where they could live. Right? He could have done any of those things. But where did the Prophet ﷺ place Ahlul Suffah? In fact, where did they even get their name? The people of that back wall. The Prophet ﷺ placed them in the masjid, in the most important building in the entire city. For all of the Muslims, this was the most important space. As if he was not only finding them a place to stay while they got themselves together, but as if he was making a statement to the entire community, to the entire city of Medina, and every Muslim who would walk in the masjid, he made a statement that this issue is central. This issue is our focal point. This issue will and must be resolved by all of us, and we cannot ignore it. Now, by housing them in the masjid, he makes this powerful statement. Eventually, brothers and sisters, the people, Ahlul Suffah, eventually they all made it through the process, particularly of zakah. And I want to highlight the way zakah was not just something that, an annual tax that people only remember during Ramadan. Zakah, my brothers and sisters, was so much more than, just an act. It became an institution, and it became that during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And that again comes to us from the Qur'an, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about zakah and those who receive zakah in Surah At-Tawbah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَفِي الرِّقَابِ وَالْغَارِمِينَ وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ فَرِيضَةً مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. Zakah is supposed to be spent, is specifically for the poor and the needy, for those who are employed to collect and administer zakah, and for bringing the hearts together, and for freeing the slaves and the captives, and for those who are oppressed by debt, and for the causes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for the stranded traveler. Is an obligation imposed by Allah, and Allah is all-knowing and wise. Look at the categories, brothers and sisters. Number one, fuqara, the poor, because zakah became the institution through which they challenged and they repaired poverty and alleviated poverty. The second category, masakin, the needy, because this is also about economic empowerment, right? And not just giving somebody enough to eat once or twice, but giving someone enough so that they become a contributor and they eventually themselves get to pay into the zakah system, right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions the category of مُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُم, to bring hearts together. Right? Because zakat was the institution through which social cohesion and even social integration was, was affected. Zakah became the means by which, as he says in the Quran, فِي الرِّقَابِ, those in bondage received their emancipation. Right? It was the institution through which emancipation and the effective abolition of slavery took place. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions al-gharimin, right? Those who are in debt, because the alleviation of debt, is a necessary part of this institution of economic justice. But look at this. Debt is not just about justice. Debt actually goes beyond economic justice. It goes into economic compassion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ups the ante. He ups the bar. It's not just about, making things even. It's about having economic compassion beyond economic justice. Right? And then he says, fi sabilillah, for God's cause, and any cause that is, inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because important spiritual causes and projects require us to be serious about them. And to be serious, we must finance them. And the next category, he says, wabn as-sabil, the stranded traveler. Right? Because some people, maybe they have wealth to their name in other situations, but they find themselves in temporary emergencies, right? Temporarily stranded, right? And particularly, by the way, the stranded traveler is a stranger. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making a point that this is not exclusive to the people that you know and you like, but it's for even the one who you've never seen, the one whose claim you cannot even verify. He says, I'm a stranded traveler. I came from this place. I would have been fine, but I just somehow ended up in this circumstance. And he knows nobody in town. And yet the Muslims would stand up and put their own reputations on the line to vouch for those individuals because they believed in this institution, brothers and sisters. Now, there's one category I skipped, and I want to mention that category last. And that is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, those who administer and collect and distribute zakah. What is this all about? I keep using the word institution, right? How do you build an institution? How do you solidify it? How do you make something that remains? How do you use zakah not just to collect and to give once, but to actually turn it into a means by which economic justice and economic compassion are employed throughout society? You hire people to do it efficiently and effectively. You make it certain people's jobs. Right? And even that is included by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reminding us that these moral awakenings that produce solutions from us must be institutionalized. It's not a one-time thing. It's not enough to say, you know what, I'm going to challenge racism by making friends with somebody who is of a different ethnic background than me. That's not enough. It has to start creating institutions and dismantling those institutions which are problematic and get in the way. The last example I'll share with you very quickly is the example that comes to us from one of the companions, one of the Ansar, Abu Talha al-Ansari, and how his example inspired the idea of awqaf, of endowments in the Muslim world. Endowments, by the way, that had incredible impact. Endowments that were separate from the state, by the way, like the veterinary houses that were established during the Umayyad dynasty in order to take ill animals and stray animals and care for them. Can you imagine? This is in the early history of Islam. These are endowments used for that. Right? And today, we don't even want to spend money on people we don't know and supporting them. This is about not just people, but other living creatures. These endowments were those endowments that gave rise to hospitals that took care of those who were ill, right? Regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of their illnesses, right? These are the same kind of endowments, the awqaf, that gave rise to the Nizamiya university system, through which some of the greatest scholars of that time were produced, right? And through which we know names as famous as Imam Haramain and Imam al-Ghazali, right? These awqaf, they come from this tradition where one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, he heard this ayah that was revealed in the Quran, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ شَيْءٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. You will never attain goodness until you spend from that which you love. And whatever you spend, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indeed well aware. Subhanallah. So Abu Talha, he hears this ayah and he goes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, Ya Rasulullah, I love, this garden of mine. It's, I love it so much, and I want to just give it for the cause of Allah because I want to attain this goodness that this ayah refers to. And what does the Prophet ﷺ tell him? He says, instead of just selling it and giving it away and using the wealth for some short-term cause, he says, use the wealth that comes from this garden. Dedicate the wealth in this garden to sponsor those people that are close to you in your tribe. And he eventually became the sponsor of so many people from his tribe. So many people. And some of those included greats such as Hassan ibn Thabit, radiallahu anhu, such as Ubay ibn Ka'ab, radiallahu anhu, Abu Talha, radiallahu anhum. Abu Talha was the one who kind of inspired this notion of awqaf through this teaching of the Prophet ﷺ, through this moral awakening he had when he heard this ayah from the Qur'an. My brothers and sisters, throughout Islamic history, we find such examples of solutions that turn into institutions. And all of them are inspired by this sense within the heart of the believers that some ongoing social ill, some ongoing social injustice must be repaired fully and completely. So what about us today? What about Muslims today? And this is how I'll end this khutbah, but I think, my brothers and sisters, it is time, right? Here we are, Muslims in America. Some of us born here, native to here, right? Some of us second and even third generations here in the United States. Is it not time for a moral awakening to come from us as well? Now, in order for that moral awakening to come, I think we have to have a bit of a history lesson. So please bear with me. These are important points that all of us should take seriously. The first thing I want to share with you today. Today is June 19th. It is also popularly known as Juneteenth. This is actually, it's an unofficial holiday. And the fact that it's unofficial is in and of itself a problem, I think, right? Today is Juneteenth, and this is the unofficial day of celebration for the emancipation of slavery in the United States of America. And it's really interesting, the history of this day, by the way. This is not the day that the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. This is actually the day, 2 years later, that the slaves and the people of Texas found out. 2 years after the emancipation, it took them to find out that actually, wait a minute, slavery is no longer legal in the United States, right? And by the way, legal, that's all it really did. There was still so much work to be done. But today is the day. And I just want to make a note that, we receive so many questions about Halloween. We receive so many questions about Thanksgiving. I have never received a question, and I'm not sure many of the imams that we work with or know have ever received a question about, what we should do or how we should participate or whether we should participate in this particular, unofficial holiday of Juneteenth. Never, right? And I just want to give you a quick clue. The Prophet ﷺ, he accepted and verbalized the willingness to participate in Ashura, right? In the 10th day of Muharram, because that was the day upon which the Jews believed that Banu Israel had been emancipated from the oppression of Pharaoh, right? And by the way, the Prophet ﷺ knew that their calendar may have been messed up. He knew that may not have been the exact day, right? That those things are still in question, yet the Prophet ﷺ still goes out of his way to enunciate that he would participate in such a day. I think the Sunnah is giving us some very clear clues here, right? This is the day upon which we recognize that slavery was beginning to be dismantled, right? The second thing, my brothers and sisters, I think we need a quick history lesson, and quick but unfortunate because I think so much more time could be spent on this. A quick history lesson on the Immigration Act of 1965. Just as a starting point, brothers and sisters, the Immigration Act of 1965 is why most of us Muslims who come from immigrant backgrounds, it's why most of us are here, right? And the Immigration Act of 1965 followed the Civil Rights Act. It essentially rode the coattails. It happened, it was signed into law because of the Civil Rights Movement. That was the primary moving factor. And I'm kind of summarizing here. A lot of what I'm taking is actually, I want to give credit and appreciation to Dr. Abdul Hakim Jackson at the University of Southern California, who talks about this extensively. I'm just summarizing here, but you can do far more research and you must. The first thing that we need to realize is before this Immigration Act, we realized that the United States of America was built on a system of slavery. And even when that system of slavery was technically dismantled, legally dismantled, it still remained through other mechanisms and entrenched racism that existed throughout society. And in the United States, there were essentially two categories of citizens, in a sense, white and black, right? Now, 1965 comes, right? Which is so much after slavery has been, essentially made illegal. But like I said, the racism that existed in society, it just evolved and it became more sophisticated, but continued to oppress African Americans in this country and provide certain whites with certain additional privileges, right? So this categorization of white and black remained socially, even if it was starting to be erased, legally, right? Now, 1965, many years after, when not much has changed on the ground, Muslims for the next couple of decades, we start immigrating to the United States. Our parents and grandparents start coming here, start showing up on these shores. And we think about it. Think about where they came from. These Muslim people were leaving lands and coming to this land seeking opportunity. Or perhaps they were fleeing unrest or oppressions of other kinds, right? But essentially they're here to try and make a better life for themselves, right? And so when they arrive, they kind of are aware of the dynamics, but maybe not aware of the history. And so this attitude develops amongst many immigrant populations, including the Muslim community, that we just want to leave people alone and be left alone. We just want to pursue our economic opportunities. But we forget to remember that those economic opportunities were reserved for one class of people and were denied to another class of people. So in order for us to get those economic opportunities that were reserved for one class of people, particularly white people, to get that, we had to, lean in that direction. We had to hang out with that side and participate more in that, in that crowd, even if we would never be considered white ourselves, obviously, right? But we want those opportunities. So let's make sure that we find ourselves in good standing with that particular crowd. And this created a very, very problematic dynamic that continues to plague us as a community, brothers and sisters. You see, this idea of leave alone and be left alone just here for economic opportunities, what it resulted in is we came here as a minority seeking to maintain our faith. And in the process of maintaining our faith, we emphasize the obligations of worship. We emphasize the obligatory acts, of piety, that, the individual acts. But at the same time, we outright neglected the obligations of justice. And tell me, brothers and sisters, where can anybody legitimately say that the cause of justice is not an obligation on Muslims? Where in our history do we find that the cause of justice is not an obligation? Where in those previous moral awakenings that were just mentioned do we find that the cause of justice is not obligatory upon us and something that our hearts compel us to if we truly have internalized Islamic morality? While seeking the opportunities afforded to white Americans, we neglected the responsibility that we had when we arrived here to African Americans. We neglected our responsibilities to justice, and we neglected that obligation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why haven't we had our moral awakening yet? It's been a while. It's been a few decades, brothers and sisters. Why haven't we had our moral awakening? It's because the Muslim community perhaps did not, and maybe still does not, understand the history of what we're dealing with. The Prophet ﷺ did not arrive in Yathrib ignorant of their history, ignorant of the conflicts. The Prophet ﷺ arrived well aware and ready to get knee deep in that particular challenge and issue. So much so that he created the concept of Ansar as a solution to the problems that existed, right? My brothers and sisters, I know that some people will say, well, the Friday spiritual topic, in the khutbah, this should be reserved for spiritual talks. But the fact is, brothers and sisters, that this knowledge and this awareness, in conjunction with the morality that is entrenched in our hearts, should give every one of us a spiritual awakening. Some may say this is fitna. This is, we don't want to get involved in this fitna. My brothers and sisters, remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an in Surah Al-Ankabut, where He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِهِمْ فَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ الْكَاذِبِينَ. Do people think that they will be left alone? Left alone? Do people think they will be left alone to say, we believe, amanna, and they will not be tested? But we have certainly tested, Allah says. We have certainly tested those before them, and Allah will surely make clear those who are truthful and those who are evident liars. My brothers and sisters, my fellow Muslim community, particularly those of us coming from immigrant backgrounds, but all Muslims who care and have that sense of moral understanding of Islam and are starting to feel the inklings of that moral awakening. My brothers and sisters, number one, we will not be left alone, and we cannot leave alone. My brothers and sisters, it is time for us to have a moral awakening in the pursuit of justice. It is time for us to start doing the work and participating in the work, because the work has already started, participating and contributing in the work to create institutions of solutions and to dismantle the institutions that created these problems and continue to push them forth. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He would make us a community, an ummah that is inspired by the teachings of Islam, an ummah that is inspired by the morality of this deen, an ummah that feels that inspiration in their hearts, like many of our youth, and we rise up to do what we know is right and stand for the cause of justice, even when it may hurt us in the short term, even when it may cost us a little bit economically, even when it may be confusing and unclear. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring us clarity. My brothers and sisters, I have some announcements, and inshallah we will dismiss, and then you can go pray Dhuhr together with your families. Remember to make sure you pray Dhuhr. This does not serve as the Jum'ah khutbah. So please do give me a little bit of your time for these important announcements. And the first of them is announcement about our reopening plans. So the phase one of reopening Tarbiyah Institute has now begun. And what this means is that we will start opening small groups of gatherings, right? So small gatherings in which there is the possibility of social distancing is present, where we can be compliant with that. Those small gatherings do not include Jum'ah yet. Right? We will continue to allow those small groups, maybe some classes, some halaqas for adults, etc., and meetings, for example, counseling sessions with the imams. We'll begin to allow those in the Roseville location and in the Natomas location on a week-by-week basis. Right? So we'll kind of go week by week with these phases. In addition to that, after careful and thorough evaluation of the current circumstances and an understanding that our community is starting to understand the rules and regulations that are required of them, because it's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult to see your brother and not hug him, and see your sister and not greet her, so violating social distancing. We plan to tentatively open the Tarbiyah House Roseville and the Tarbiyah House Natomas for Jum'ah services, subhanAllah, hoping soon in early July. So we're planning for that, but we have to, again, take this week by week and phase by phase. And I understand that we're all, we've been waiting patiently, but we all need to do the right thing here as well. And I know that you all understand that. And by the way, updates for that can be found on the website at tarbiyah.org. By the way, I forgot to mention this as part of the announcements, but quote unquote, pass the boxes as well. Just remember to use the Venmo link to contribute wherever you like and support our ongoing efforts. Also a reminder that tonight, inshallah, to tune in to TarbiyaLive, which will be live on YouTube and Facebook for part 1 of Surah Hijr with Imam Aziz. That'll be tonight at 7:30. Please do tune in and share that with others as well. By the way, if you are, right in this particular topic, if you're a young person, a teen or a youth interested in social justice causes, we have a summer project that we're working on called Summer Justice. We meet every Wednesday at about 8:30 p.m. For approximately an hour. We discuss and we actually take action. We plan things, attending protests, writing letters, making phone calls, things that actually help to bring social justice about. Things that actually, they're actions that we can take. And you can join our WhatsApp group. You can find the link for the WhatsApp group in the comments. If you know youth that would be interested, please let them know. And also registration for next Friday. If you'd like to attend Tafsir on next Friday, you can register online. You can do that. There's limited spots, by the way. There's only 10 attendees that can attend. So if you would like to attend, you can register online. And again, the link for that will be provided. A couple of quick announcements about our facility as well. We're getting our new facility ready for reopening, and actually both facilities ready for reopening. And this will require the purchasing of many supplies, particularly for safety and for sanitation, and also supplies and equipment for security in order to open safely and properly manage the crowds. So if you'd like to help us in purchasing those supplies, please either send one of us a message. You can text me or send me a message or call me, or any of the other imams or any of the other staff members, or you can go to our website as well and you can contribute through there, and you can specify what this contribution is for. You can even do that on Venmo as well. Also, we plan to purchase an internal speaker system that will go through the entire building of the new facility. And this is where the adhan will sound off every day. This is where announcements will be made that will go across the building. So if you'd like to help and receive the ajr and the reward for the rest of eternity for all of these announcements and adhan that will be made, you can reach out to one of us and we can help you, direct you to sponsor that particular project. We're also looking for lightly used but in good condition gym equipment. We're not taking everything. We have limited space, but we are, there's certain specific equipment that we're looking for, and you can, if you'd like to donate that, you can reach out to us. By the way, our phone number again, 916-800-4111, or you can email us at info@tarbiya.org, and sending pictures would definitely help. Another exciting announcement, we are hiring in Roseville. We are hiring at the Tarbiya House, Roseville. We're looking for an energetic, dynamic office manager, and if you are interested, and you feel like you would be the right candidate, or somebody who would be, please email us your resume at info@tarbiya.org. And finally, we have some dua requests. The first of them is really sad news. Brother Ali Tayyib, who used to pray Jama'ah with us, every day, and we'd see him in Roseville, smiling and sitting with us, there, and arriving early. I still clearly remember his face. He passed away yesterday morning. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept him in the highest levels of Jannah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept him amongst the righteous and the prophets and the companions. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give his family peace and tranquility through this tragedy. Again, he passed away yesterday morning. The janazah has already been taken care of yesterday evening. So please continue to make dua for him and for his family. Also, dua requests for Ihtisham Akram, who was recently diagnosed with coronavirus and is really struggling. And the doctors are unsure of his condition. We are asking all of you to make dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him a full and speedy recovery and to be the source of healing for him and for any of those who are suffering with this illness, to eradicate this illness from our world. Allahumma ameen. Also, a dua request for Anwar Salman, who is suffering from severe typhoid, and also for Brother Arif, who is suffering with severe pneumonia. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give both of them healing and recovery and return them to their full health. And finally, dua request for the brother of Sister Aisha Chowdhury, who is a community member of ours. All of you know her and her family. Her brother was just recently tested positive for COVID-19 as well. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him and all other patients a speedy, a complete, a full recovery, to make their time that they suffer in this way very short and without pain, and to give them a full bill of health soon, return them to their families safe and sound. Allahumma ameen. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. Jazakallah khair, brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Please remember to pray Dhuhr right after we end the feed.